我们继续跟澳洲麦觉理大学的季北慈教授来继续做访谈。Professor Gill, you were recently concentrating on United Front strategy by China, and you seem to suggest that this is a way China exerting its political influence abroad, legally or illegally. My question is, we in Taiwan heard a lot about United Front, and we always think that it's kind of political deception that CCP had been using in order to counter the Kuomintang at the time. What exactly is United Front from your understanding, and how is it different from the sharp power that people had talked about this before?
Right. Well, I think the United Front seems to be a blanket term to apply for all kinds of different efforts to politically influence thinking within target societies, target governments. And as you know, this dates back. It's one of the Chinese Communist Party's oldest organizations, and at its fundamental origins, it is an organization which seeks to work with non-communist party bodies, individuals, to bring them into a common front, which would be supportive of CCP and PRC goals, right? How does that get translated today? A couple of interesting things. First of all, I believe under Xi Jinping, the United Front organization has been given dramatically increased resources, and maybe more importantly, dramatically increased mandate to operate overseas. So virtually all organizations that have any sort of ongoing contact with foreigners, foreign organizations, are sort of expected to coordinate their work under the direction of the United Front work department. My interest, though, is primarily in how these activities work to shape the viewpoints of elites, of politicians, of important civil society organizations, shape those viewpoints so that they align more closely to the interests of the party and of the PRC more broadly. And this can be done in a number of ways. It can be done through propaganda, through media activity, Chinese state-owned media, for example, in trying to shape domestic opinions either in the local language or through Chinese language media targeting Chinese-speaking diaspora in those respective governments. That's one important way. Cultivation of elites and politicians, through various inducements, whether it's political support, financial support, trips to China, opportunities to engage with leadership and the like, all with an aim of, I guess, as Xi Jinping would say, telling China's story. But more importantly, not just telling the story, but getting you to tell the story in a way that's aligned with their thinking. Now, all governments, large and small, attempt in their own way to influence elites in other countries so that those elites will, at least be sympathetic to the views of the original government. So in that sense, maybe it's no different. Maybe it's no different than typical public diplomacy. But I have issues with United Front activity on at least two levels. One, sometimes these activities are covert or even illegal. That's a real problem. Undertaking illegal activities on foreign soil should bother us, no matter what government it might be. And then secondly, these activities are done on behalf of a one-party authoritarian regime. And it's an effort to try and legitimate and ultimately promote the long-term survival of this regime. I think in the West, in the liberal democratic West, that's a problem, and it worries us. And I think for those two reasons at least, we need to be more aware of these sorts of activities, understand that they're happening and why, and what it is we can do in terms of societal resilience to try and at least limit or deflect the worst aspects of these activities.
You just mentioned that every country are doing a similar thing through public diplomacy, but there's a particular kind that I think China is very worrying. 20 years ago, it's called peaceful evolution. That's exactly the term they think why the Soviet Union had collapsed. I mean, the West have been using these tactics, try to influence and penetrate the socialist regime in this way. Is a fair description of peaceful evolution in terms of how we see it as a united front strategy right now?
It's an interesting comparison, I think. Obviously, for different purpose. The United Front ultimately is aiming to create an atmosphere of acceptance. Basically to counter the peaceful evolution of the West, to present a kind of fait accompli to the world, to say, we're a legitimate government, we're here to stay, you in the West and on the outside need to accept that, not only accept it, but respect it, and hopefully not only respect, but maybe even come to appreciate and support our form of governance and our leadership and what we can bring to the world. I think, in other words, if they can succeed at that, then they will have solved their own peaceful evolution problem, right? And which has been not just in the last 20 years. I mean, I think, according to the Chinese Communist Party narrative, it's been ever since 1949, or even ever since the 1930s, that foreign powers, foreign agents, want to destroy China. And so, a part of this is to bring an end to that phase, as they understand it, that would then allow China to sort of enter the global community as a normal, acceptable, even appreciated country under the leadership, very important, and under the leadership of the Communist Party.
You once described the United Front strategy as a third front. That is, you have the economic competition, and you have military competition later on, and now it's the competition of idea. But my feeling about what gives the CCP such a confidence is that after 2008, the financial crisis, all of a sudden they found that the Washington consensus used to be the free market system and the liberal democracy are no longer being set as a paradigm or the prime example of which the CCP or the Chinese should follow. I mean, it proved that maybe Marx was right, that the capitalist system will come to its own meeting of its own ends. So is that give Chinese such a confidence saying that we have our system and you cannot change our regime by your idea. We have our own idea, and this Beijing consensus can help us to perpetuate our system in a way.
There's no doubt that one reason for, I think, the success, the more forward-leaning tactics and strategy, and the increasing concern about United Front activities is precisely because of our own crisis of confidence within liberal democracies around the world. As we do probably some long overdue reflection self-assessment, and ultimately adaptation. I think we're seeing that happening around the world. This will be a long process, obviously, but it's a process that will unfold, and I suspect, I would expect that liberal democracies around the world will emerge stronger for having dealt with, for having had an honest debate about the flaws in the system and trying to rectify them. It's not going to happen quickly. And in the meantime, yes, I think China has gained confidence that its system, has proven itself and its value. I guess what we should think, the way I would think about this is really as a longer term kind of battle, I guess, for hearts and minds in a way. And I don't think we should write off liberal democracy and the sort of open liberal system, economic and political system, quite yet.
We just mentioned that there is legal and illegal parts of this Chinese political influence abroad, and a lot of countries are being aware of this and then try to stop the illegal parts, especially in Australia. Now you are having foreign interference law, and Taiwan is having a similar kind of law proposed during the legislative yuan right now. But there's a big debate going on, and a lot of people are worrying that this may be used by the ruling party to turn against the political opposition. And the businessmen, Taiwan businessmen doing business in China, are afraid that this will be turned against them as a spy for China and so on and so forth, because they are somehow caught in between China and Taiwan government. And when the local officials asking them to do something, it's very hard for them to refuse. They don't know where the boundary is, illegal. How do you respond to that kind of concern?
Well, I would say that the introduction of a foreign interference law in Taiwan is going to be particularly difficult and sensitive for a lot of reasons. Most of all, because of the depth of integration and entwinement which these two societies have across the Taiwan Strait. I don't think Australia doesn't have anywhere close to that degree of intertwinement, and so I think it's possible to develop a fair set of criteria by which foreign agents are defined, and laws can then be put in place to make sure that those criteria are enforced. So it's going to be a lot more difficult here. I can see why that would be the case. Nevertheless, I think it's healthy and probably wise to, at a minimum, consider how Taiwan should be more vigilant, more resilient, more aware of and prepared to push back on various forms of interference and influence by the mainland, which is only going to increase as we go forward. As Beijing feels it has both greater confidence, greater capability, and probably greater urgency about the situation here and the long-term prospects for its goal, which is, as we know, reunification. So even if the law, for whatever reason here in Taiwan, does not ultimately prevail, I think it's a good thing to be having this conversation and raising the profile of the problem, which is most acute in Taiwan for any place else in the world.
Thank you very much, Professor Gill, to be in our show and talk about a lot of things that is on your mind. Hope you come back again.
Thank you.
We can have another interview.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. 谢谢各位的收看，我们下次见。